Hello everyone, welcome to the course. I have created this first lecture video as a getting started point to kind of help orient you to what is to come. So this is a very unique course because of the fact that it's only a single semester and none of you are in a nutrition curriculum or a health sciences curriculum. If you want a more in-depth understanding of that, then there is another course that's available, which is a requirement for the Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, but anyone is welcome to take it, and so you can certainly look into that option. Here we're going to be touching on some of the science and much of the application. Nutrition science is a very complex science, and there is absolutely no way that any course can cover it in depth in one semester, much less a course that is designed to translate some of that science into the culinary components and the food preparation techniques. So I am going to give you probably more science than what you were expecting because you have to understand the why in order to be able to translate it effectively into the what. If you know why certain things should be limited because you understand why they do what they do in the body, then it's much easier to think through what would be an acceptable modification approach in the kitchen in order to make something equally as appealing as its original counterpart, or simply to allow you to creatively come up with new ideas that make foods flavorful, aesthetically appealing, tasty, filling, and overall satisfying, while also empowering one to embrace good health. So I'm going to begin by giving you some insights into why it all matters. So we track all of the health conditions that are prevalent within our society in this country. There are ongoing studies, and collectively every several years we look at what are the most prevalent diseases and disabilities. And one of our biggest concerns is that heart disease and strokes are really the same disease, and collectively they are known as cardiovascular disease. So cardio means your heart, and vascular means your vessels. And if you were to picture your body with all of the exterior parts removed, what you would see is a big network of vessels. It ranges from your head all the way to your toes to the tips of your fingers. So you are one large system. Nothing is in isolation, and we're going to talk about this more later. And you're going to become able to better appreciate the fact that whatever is happening in any one part of the body is happening in others. So whatever's happening in the heart, where heart disease can occur, is happening in the legs and the arms and in the abdomen and the brain. And so the primary vessels that are most commonly affected in this country are those in the brain and the heart. So those are collectively known as cardiovascular diseases, but the most common forms of cardiovascular disease that you hear about is heart disease and stroke. So again, we'll talk more about that at a later date. Now, the concern is not that these things happen, period. Yes, we are all going to die. The idea is not to live forever. The idea is very simple: to prevent premature, meaning something that happens too soon, death and disability. So in this country, far too many people are having things like strokes and heart attacks too early in life. And not only is it killing people well before how long they should have lived, but for those who do survive, it is often compromising their quality of life due to long-term effects. And that means that they're missing out on things, whether it's employment or life experiences, that they're suffering for an extended period of time. Cancer and diabetes are the same. You will be amazed to realize how many of our lifestyle habits directly have an impact on the development of numerous cancers. Now, I will tell you that there are more cancers than you could probably imagine. In fact, there are over 100 types of identified cancers. But some of those that you are most familiar with, like breast cancer, uterine or ovarian cancer, testicular and prostate cancer, esophageal cancer, which is throat cancer. Some of these most common cancers are very highly correlated with lifestyle, in large part dietary habits and the impacts that those have on our body, and we will look more at that at a later date. Diabetes, you're going to learn, is not something that arises due to excess sugar intake. That's a common myth, and at a later date, we'll dig deeper into that. But suffice it to say that eating habits certainly have an influence on the development of many of the cases of diabetes in this country, and we'll look at the different types of diabetes briefly when we get to that, and we'll talk about how and why that occurs. But what it can safely be said is that in a nutshell, poor eating behaviors, those which are not providing us with abundance of valuable nutrients, but rather are providing us with an abundance of nutrients, period, are the problem. Because you see, everything that you consume, everything you put in your mouth is made up of mixtures of chemicals called nutrients. And too little or too much are equally problematic. And so we are really looking to turn the tide in this country and to help people appreciate how the choices that we make on a daily basis in terms of what we choose to consume has an immense impact on what will happen to us in terms of health. In other words, we wield a great deal of power. Studies show that the combination of too few vegetables and fruits, we don't eat enough plant foods, and eating away from home, restaurant foods or deli prepared foods or frozen meals are highly correlated with these rising incidences of otherwise preventable premature death and disability. No one wants to have any of these diseases. Might some of them arise if you live long enough despite your best efforts? Sure, but if they strike you at 90, that's much different than if they strike you at 30 or 40 or 50, or even, as we're beginning to see more and more, in your 20s. And so we know that there are many, many issues related to what people are eating when they're eating outside the home, never mind what they're eating inside the home. But what we certainly can appreciate is that when people are eating inside the home, if they are actually buying ingredients and assembling them into some sort of meals, then they have more control over what they consume. When they eat outside the home, they don't often know what is in their food other than what they can see. They don't know the sodium content of each respective ingredient. They don't know what seasonings were added and what they contained. They don't know how much fat was utilized or what types. Ultimately, when we go out to eat, let's face it, we're all looking to be pleased. We want a pleasurable experience. And by and large, the sorts of foods that we offer in these dining settings are those designed to appeal to people's taste and aesthetics and not very much of a focus on health. But it's very possible to accomplish both. The more skilled you are as a culinarian, the more capable you are of merging the worlds of nutrition and desirable dining. As you look at the content on this page, think about the fact that the combination of knowledge, nutrition knowledge, and how to prepare food is probably one of the most empowering sets of skills that a person can possess in today's world. Luckily, there's a growing interest in cooking and nutrition everywhere. Television, magazines, radio, podcasts. There is such a wealth of resources, whether people realize it or not. Now, many of the resources might be less than reliable, less than credible, maybe geared towards fads, but there are many that aren't. There are many that are very reliable. If you're not familiar with Ellie Krieger, she's a registered dietitian and a chef, and she has a show on the Food Network. And there are more and more people like her appearing in media today. The idea is that those of us with the power to influence what people consume and to help them appreciate how joyful it can be to partake of food that we all love while nourishing our body and preventing disease and disability is an amazing opportunity, should we embrace it, that has ever-growing opportunities professionally. And we're going to look at some of those in a short while. Now, I want to point out to you some of the images here because they're pretty typical images of much restaurant food. Yes, of course, you can find some things with a little bit more color on the plate, but by and large, most of us know that the center of the plate focus is not usually colorful produce. And if you think about the restaurants that you frequent or where you work or that you're familiar with, and you stop and contemplate what's on the menu, ask yourself, how many opportunities are there for an abundance of colorful, lively, appealing vegetable dishes? Even the vegetarian dishes on most menus are lacking, and there's often not any, and if there are, it's one or two. It is something not very exciting. So there's going to be a huge emphasis in this course on plant foods because I can't tell you often enough that, very simply put, plants are where it's at. When it comes to health, plants are where it's at, and that's a thread that's going to be common here. Now, that's not to say that people can't eat animal foods, and again, we're going to get into that a little more later. You can eat an entirely plant-based diet and be phenomenally healthy, or you can eat an omnivorous diet, which consists of plants and animals, if the balance is there. And that means mostly plants and far fewer animal foods. And as you come to understand the why, then the what will make more sense. Give you a moment to read if you haven't already done so here. There seems to be building evidence to link the trend of poor dietary habits with the lack of cooking at home and nutrition knowledge. Now, you can see what it tells you here on the page, and I can tell you from personal experience, over 25 years of experience, in fact, that cooking skills are grossly lacking in today's population. People's idea of cooking is somewhat skewed. I've asked small children, how do you make a cake? And they'll start with opening the box. They don't even know that there are actual raw ingredients like flour and sugar and such. Oftentimes, people's ideas of cooking dinner at home involves opening certain packages, microwaving things. While there are some wonderful options out there, like steam in the bag veggies now, that's not what most people are thinking of when they think of these things. So what we need to appreciate from a culinarian's perspective is how simple, easy, and inexpensive it can be to prepare really enjoyable, healthful foods in minimal time. And the more so that we can do that, the more so we're able to serve the needs of our clientele in all sorts of hospitality settings, as well as feed ourselves and our families at home, and possibly find ways within our communities to reach others and educate them to this effect. You don't always have to think inside the box in terms of career opportunities. Now there are celebrity chefs on television, radio, and all sorts of magazines and other media venues such as YouTube. There are opportunities to be part of corporate wellness programs where you host cooking classes to teach entire populations of different companies who are looking to promote wellness within their ranks. There are opportunities to be corporate menu designers for hotel chains and other entities like wellness resorts. There are opportunities to own local cooking schools that focus on healthy cooking to empower people in their homes. There are opportunities within schools and civic organizations. The list is really endless, and the world really is your oyster in terms of what you can do with combined nutrition and food preparation knowledge. It has been my experience over the years in counseling people that it's all fine and dandy to tell them what they should be eating, but their inability to translate that in the home kitchen is the biggest obstacle of all. And so hopefully with your expertise and mine, we can help empower people to help themselves. Hopefully you've heard of Jamie Oliver. He's a famous chef. He's done quite a few things to promote and encourage movements within school systems throughout this country and elsewhere in terms of changing what have become very unhealthy menus, and trying to bring back some of the more traditional food preparation techniques. More and more, you're starting to see all sorts of universities that offer degrees in nutrition and culinary arts. You're starting to see all sorts of wellness programs pop up in all sorts of settings. Some you can see up in the right-hand corner that I've already mentioned. There are even medical schools that are starting to actually have cooking courses for MDs, medical doctors. So let me mention on a side note that only about 30% of the medical schools in this country even require that a physician in training take a single nutrition course. That is not their field of expertise. They have a very valuable role to serve in being experts in procedures and pharmaceuticals. They know how to diagnose disease, and they know how to treat things with those adjunctive therapies. And while those therapies are often essential or necessary, nutrition is another method that needs to be utilized in many instances as well. And sometimes it may be sufficient on its own. So registered dietitian nutritionists such as myself are the equivalent of physicians, whereas our tools are that of food and other lifestyle elements like physical activity. Hopefully, you will start to see more and more of a holistic approach in many settings where physicians and dietitians are wielding their tools together for the best possible outcomes. Some of the largest cancer treatment programs in this country at some of the most prestigious and well-respected medical facilities are now aggressively embracing medical nutrition therapy, which is what dietitians approach, and mandating that doctors and dietitians and psychologists and social workers and such all come together to create entire programs for treatment and recovery. So that's one of the most favorable settings for the application of these cross-utilized skills right now. But you're going to see more and more opportunities all the time. So while studies show that many chefs prepare meals that are inconsistent with the recommendations for good health in this country, it's also been evident through various surveys amongst culinary professionals that there is a yearning for knowledge. Again, the world is changing, and so many different professional opportunities exist and or demand a dual skill set, and many people are feeling lost and lacking, and so there is this huge movement to integrate the two sets of knowledge for benefit. You know, I will say the flip side is true as well. Admittedly, I know many people with credentials like my own as a registered dietitian nutritionist who don't know much about cooking, and I'm not really sure how they're able to translate their knowledge in a useful way if they don't know what to do in the kitchen. And so to have people who are skilled in kitchens who don't understand nutrition is equally unfortunate. And so for those of us who have pursued education in order to possess dual knowledge, then we're going to really be the ones that are at an advantage. So chefs are looking to educators, nutritionists, and others like myself to help them better understand, and that is what I'm here to do for you. So culinary nutrition is the application of nutrition principles combined with food science and knowledge of culinary skill. So going into the kitchen and understanding why it is that fat is essential, that it has to do with heat transfer, that fat is necessary for moisture and a softer texture, and that it has a mouthfeel relevance is really important in preparing desirable food. And then if you understand which fats are most healthful, then you can choose those and you can have that desired culinary outcome with the associated health benefits of the wiser fat choice. If you understand the role in the kitchen of sugar, in that it decreases acidity of sauces, or that it's essential for the formation of a crust in a baked good, but then you understand how different forms of sugars can be more or less beneficial choices, then you can choose those which still have the same outcome, but which may potentially be a better choice in the interest of one's health. So there's so much to know, and you already hopefully possess a great deal of that culinary expertise, and now you're going to round it out with some nutrition science expertise. Give you a moment to complete the reading of the screen. So you see here that there are a lot of different opportunities, as I was mentioning, and I'm going to go to a larger screen and show you here. If you look down here, and they're looking at different aspects. You know, fitness opportunities within hotels are really big right now. I don't know how many of you travel a lot, but if you've spent much time traveling, you know there are now hotel rooms that actually have gyms inside the individual hotel room, whole little workout stations in some of them. Most of your commuter-based and larger facilities now have really large, adequately equipped gyms and outdoor recreation and exercise options as well, like running paths or walking paths and such, as well as pools and everything. When you look down here to the food part, you can see that Hilton has worked with Johnson & Wales University to come up with their own special menu. Starwood Properties, one of the other largest chains, Marriott has such opportunities, as do Westin and others. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But you can see that wellness tourism is a term you're going to start to hear quite a bit about. There are all sorts of wellness spas and retreats that are becoming bigger and bigger deals. If any of you ever saw the show The Biggest Loser that was so popular, which I think has recently been reincarnated, that show kind of launched the movement in the terms of the wellness resorts, because there were Biggest Loser resorts around the country, and from that you're seeing more and more, and you can expect that that's going to grow. You can see that this was through 2017, so this is now a couple of years old, and the percentages have increased since then. So one of the things that I ask that you write down and that you really, really make sure you grasp is something that we're going to refer back to time and time again. All food is going to be categorized in one of two ways. It's either a plant food or an animal food. You must understand that. So as you look here at the picture on the left, you see that these are plant foods, fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, which you could simplify and call beans, nuts, seeds. Now I want you to look in the center of the picture, and you see that grain there, those long wispy looking things on the right hand side just below the grapes. Some people have never actually seen grain as it appears upon harvesting. So those are intact grains. Now remember, grain doesn't just mean wheat. Wheat is simply one of many types of grains, and we're going to look at different categories of foods. But keep in mind that grains like rice, bulgur, wheat, barley, the list goes on, corn, are whole when they're harvested. So they're whole grains. The whole thing, like you see there, is intact. And when you grind up the whole grain, you have the whole mixture of nutrients, and that's what we want. But as you're going to hear more about in the near future, we unfortunately have moved into an era where we refine grains. Refine simply means remove. So we remove portions for a number of reasons. And in doing so, we reduce the nutritional value of the grain. So you hear a lot of negativity about grains these days, and the science does not support the fact that grains are bad. The problem is refined grains. So we're going to have a lot of emphasis on that, because we're going to focus here on science, not trends, not fads, not pseudoscience and hype. So hopefully that will be clearly differentiated for you. When you think of nuts and you think of seeds, these are plants, right? Seeds are the seeds of plants. Nuts grow. Many of them are tree nuts. So pecans, almonds. When you think of a peanut in a culinary or botanical sense is actually a legume, a type of bean. It's just called a peanut because it is more similar in its nutrient content to tree nuts than it is to legumes. So ultimately, those sorts of foods are incredible options to equal or mimic animal foods in the diet. Legumes, nuts, and seeds are rich sources of proteins. We can think nut butters like peanut butter and almond butter and sunflower seed butter, or we can think about crusting things in nuts and seeds that have been crushed. So think outside the box and don't think about leaving everything intact. Ask yourself, how can I creatively modify some of these things and use them in a diverse array of ways? So again, fruits and vegetables are a given. Whole grains, legumes or beans, nuts and seeds. You want to think about the whole diverse array of plant foods. And therefore, the animal foods become very logical. These would be anything that qualify as meat. Sometimes seafood is considered meat. Sometimes people differentiate, say meat and seafood. Eggs and all dairy. So milk and products made from milk comprise dairy. The other thing that I want you to write down is that nutrition is chemistry. Very simply put, chemistry, whether it's any of the things you see here, from physics to earth sciences to biology, is all about the interaction of chemicals, right? So within the human body, chemicals interact with one another, chemical reactions. And those chemical reactions generate outcomes that sustain our life. In other words, those chemical reactions are what make everything happen. They're the reason your heart beats. They're the reason your blood pumps. They're the reason you breathe. They're the reason that you reproduce. Chemical reactions are what allow your hair and your fingernails and your skin to grow. Chemical reactions are what enabled your bones to go from infancy to where they are now. Chemical reactions are what enable you to digest food and effectively excrete it. Chemistry is how you derive energy from your food and other forms of nourishment. And everything that happens within inside every one of the trillions of cells that makes up your body is a chemical reaction that supports and sustains human life. So most of us at some point in a science class have studied the periodic table of elements. Look over there in the yellow. You see sodium, magnesium, calcium, potassium, just a few examples of these elements, these chemical elements that are nutrients. So when we move into studying the 6 classes of nutrients, what you are studying are the different chemicals and how they behave inside the body. So what I'd now like for you to write in your notes is this: 6 classes of nutrients. What you see at the bottom of the screen. Carbohydrates. You can abbreviate that in parentheses CHO. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. See how it's a chemical? It's a chemical compound. Fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, water. I'm sure you know the abbreviation for water, H2O, 2 hydrogens and an oxygen, right? Carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water are the 6 classes of nutrients. And then what I would like for you to write down is 1 non-nutrient substance in foods. Confers, C-O-N-F-E-R-S, many health benefits. 1 non-nutrient substance in foods confers many health benefits. And that's the word you see here, phytochemicals. So phyto is a term that means plant. So where are you going to find these chemicals? In plants. And what are plants? Fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, and grains. So all plant foods, in addition to containing carbohydrate, fat, protein, water, minerals, and vitamins, also contain phytochemicals. More to come on that. So, people, when they hear the word chemicals, often conjure up negative images. They think of things that are harmful. They think of things that are synthetic, which is just a fancy word for man-made. And that's so not true, because you see, everything is a chemical. The desk that you might be sitting at, the chair, the oxygen that you take in, the carbon dioxide that you exhale, the food that you eat, everything is just chemicals. It's all matter, and matter consists of chemicals, atoms made up of different chemicals. So as you look at this really drives the point home, because if you looked at that ingredients list below the egg and you didn't see a picture of an egg, you might think it was something to fear. The same is true for the banana or the blueberries. But what it's illustrating to you is that foods are nothing but big mixtures of chemicals, and the word chemical should not have a negative connotation. If you want to speak of a harmful chemical, then say a harmful chemical or a man-made chemical that can potentially do harm. But these are naturally occurring chemicals in nature. These are what make up foods. So your body is nothing but a big chemistry plant. Bio means life. So biology is the study of life. Anytime you see ology, it's study of. Bio is life. Biology is the study of life. So one element of life is the chemistry of life. Biochemistry. So you see, very simply put, nutrition is biochemistry. And I'm going to ask that you write that down. Nutrition is biochemistry. Nutrition is the study of all the chemical reactions that occur within the body to promote and sustain human life. So before we look at the textbook, I am actually going to show you a couple of other things. So I want to share with you just a few websites I pulled up to kind of drive home what's going on in the hospitality industry, and that encompasses restaurants, hotels, resorts, and all of it. If you start exploring, you will start to realize how common this movement is. So here on this particular website, which is a hospitality industry website, you can see down here about the things that people are demanding. Diners are asking up front about dietary concerns. They want to know what's in their food. They want to appreciate the offerings that you have that will accommodate their unique needs. So, of course, the front of the house staff has to know about food, but how are they going to be well educated? They're going to rely on the back of the house staff. So people in the back of the house have to be well educated. You can't just go, oh, we won't tell them it's in there. It's not quite the same thing as going, we're out of regular coffee, we'll give them decaf and they'll never know. That can be a very big deal. If someone has an allergy and consumes something, potentially they could die. So allergens are something that we have to be really big on. There are also things that aren't allergies, but that are highly related to those, such as a disease, in which case gluten is a severe concern. Now, only about 1% of the population actually has the disease called celiac disease, where they absolutely cannot have any gluten. Should they have the gluten, it's probably not going to kill them, but it's going to make them very, very ill, depending upon how much they consume. So to manage their disease, they have to avoid it entirely. There has also been a big trend towards people embracing what they call gluten intolerance. That's not the same. That means that somebody feels that if they consume gluten, they experience some sort of degree of discomfort, although in many cases people may not even be correctly judging that because they don't know what else is in their food that they might be having a reaction to. But it doesn't matter. People are still interested in avoiding it, so we have to know where gluten is found and how to prepare meals without it. Vegetarian and vegans, there's a huge movement, and this isn't always about health. Animal rights is a hot topic in this country these days. Many people are concerned with the ethics and the humane treatment of animals and do not want to consume animal foods. Others are equally driven by health interest, and so we have to be able to know how to creatively design appealing foods that are equal to all others on the menu, which meet these needs. You can see here, as I look here about hotels and resorts accommodating food allergies, there's a lot of information, not sure why this isn't popping up at the moment, about different resorts that are really actively embracing this. Cruises as well, looking at some of the special needs, cruises are now, like many hotels, embracing meatless meals, low sodium, gluten-free, kosher, all of these things, whether it's a need related to a specific religion, such as the kosher foods, or something related to health conditions, are things that we have to be able to accommodate in today's world. Now, here's just an example, a combination, or a merger rather, between a medical school, School of Public Health, Department of Nutrition, a major university, and CIA. Hopefully you know what the Culinary Institute of America is, and some of the amazing opportunities that they have to train professionals. You can see here it's an annual gathering, and this ranges from everyone from physicians, registered dietitian nutritionists like myself, other healthcare professionals, and chefs coming together to create all of these phenomenal dual education opportunities. Again, Johnson & Wales University with one of the degrees that I mentioned in culinary nutrition, because food science is chemistry, and there are many applications to be a chef, to understand culinary nutrition, to help create different things that are healthful and shelf stable. Disney has a huge movement I'm sure you're familiar with, offering more and more animal-free meals. So vegan means no animals at all. Vegetarian usually means that somebody consumes select animal foods. Maybe dairy, maybe not. Maybe eggs, maybe not. Maybe seafood, maybe not. There are lots of different types of vegetarians, but ultimately it means the omission of some degree of animal foods. So vegan is much harder for some people to appease because it gets very strict. It omits things like honey and certain other things like maybe chicken broth and such. So understanding the details is critical to successfully being able to translate your knowledge into desirable meals. You can see here that Disney is doing this checkmark system to help people identify the healthier foods, both for adults and kids. There's a huge movement in feeding kids better, which is something that I could speak to for hours because it is definitely a weakness in our community. Might be of interest to you to know that health preferences, or rather food preferences, I should say, which determine health outcomes, food preferences, research shows, are well established from ages 1 to 6. So what we are feeding kids at that point is really setting them on a path for life. It becomes harder and harder to change habits as the years go by. So as role models, as parents and adults that kids spend time with, it's really important for us to emulate healthy eating behaviors from the get-go so that they can establish those habits. You know, when adults are saying, I don't like vegetables, then that's what kids are learning. And so the children are going to have the same health outcomes that the kids do. It has been said in the past 10 years that the generations that are being born now are going to have a shorter lifespan than their grandparents and their great-grandparents, which is truly sad because lifespans increased dramatically in the past 200 years with improvements in food supply and food security and things like vaccinations. And now lifespans are once again in a downward spiral due to premature death related to lifestyle habits that range from smoking and sedentary lifestyles to unhealthy eating habits. So to know that our kids may live a shorter lifespan than we have because of what we're teaching them should be a pretty profound realization. You can see the Western resorts are embracing all sorts of eating well initiatives, and then back to this same imagery that I showed you before. So now we're moving on to the textbook, and you should have found the link that took you to this page, and you need to use this download option and give it a few moments and save it to your device. And once you do that, then it will take you to the actual textbook itself. So that being said, what I would like to do is a brief review of Chapter 1. You're actually going to need to read Chapter 1. Between this lecture content and what you read there, you'll be able to complete the first assignment, but I'm going to give you a little guidance by looking through the pages with you briefly. So I have downloaded the book to my desktop and I have opened it. One of the things you may not know is that you can make it larger. It's certainly much easier to read, so that's what I like to do. And then I like to get the screen so it's centered. So as I scroll down, it's going to take me through the pages. I don't have to flip left to right. So as you begin here, I'm not expecting you to use any of these links you see, whether they're live or not. If there's something I feel that you should click on, I will instruct you to do so. Otherwise, let's keep it very simple. Try not to bite off any more than you have to, because this way you're focused on what matters and you're keeping things simple for yourself. So it tells you here, as we get started on our journey into the world of health and nutrition, our first focus will be to demonstrate that nutritional science is an evolving field of study, continually being updated and supported by research, studies, and trials. So I will tell you that nutrition science is still very much in its infancy. In other words, there is still a lot we don't know. So that's valuable to you. Why? First of all, a lot of the information that you hear from other sources, non-academic sources, this is an academic source, a college course. So what you hear from other sources is often unreliable for a number of reasons. Those sources may have their own agenda, something that they wish to promote, a product, a program, or otherwise. Second, many of those sources are taking information out of context. The people that are sharing that information with you may not know what they don't know, and so some of the ways in which they present information is not entirely accurate, for better or for worse. Additionally, a lot of people like to jump on to the latest and the greatest information and get out there and promote it, and they don't realize that really it's not solid information yet. It takes a good 10 to 20 years to really solidify our understanding of many scientific things. And so just because some study came out that said something doesn't mean that that's the end-all be-all. In science, we say one study means nothing. You must replicate a study over and over and over, and it must be done by people who don't know each other so that they are not influenced by any sort of bias. And it is only when certain information is repeatedly acquired by the same means that it is deemed reliable. And even then, it's still subject to change because we might have overlooked something and our knowledge will evolve later. So I want to ask you to read this first section here, this little example about peptic ulcers, a great story. It continues all the way through until you get down here to section 1.1. And it tells you that Americans are bombarded with television programs that show where to find the best dinners, pizzas, and cakes, and the restaurants that serve the biggest and juiciest burgers. Other programs feature chefs battling to prepare meals and the top places to burst your belly for consuming atomic chicken wings and deli sandwiches longer than a foot. There are also shows that feature bizarre foods from cultures around the world. How do you use the information from popular network food shows to build a nutritious meal? You don't. These shows are for entertainment. The construction of a nutritious meal requires learning about which foods are healthy and which foods are not, how foods and nutrients function in your body, and how to use scientific resources. So, this text is designed to provide you with the information necessary to make sound nutritional choices that will optimize health and prevent disease. So, what I'd like you to write down is that the goal of understanding nutrition equals optimize health and prevent disease. The goal of understanding nutrition equals optimize health and prevent disease. As you continue down here, I want you to carefully read the section beneath the plate and all the way down, nutrition, health, and disease. Now, disease is defined as any abnormal condition affecting the health of an organism. So just because one is free of disease doesn't mean the person is healthy. Because if you don't know you're sick, it doesn't mean you're healthy. So this is why we encourage people from a healthcare perspective to go every year and get a physical exam, which doesn't just mean they look at your body, it means they test your blood. Because you see, those blood tests tell us what's going on inside of you. In other words, we are assessing your biochemistry, the chemistry inside your body. And we want to see, does the chemistry look like everything's working right, or is the chemistry a hot mess? Because if the chemistry is out of whack, then your health is out of whack. And we can tell you that. And then we can say, you can throw this train in reverse and here's how. Or this is going on and you've got to know that you're unwell. Because if you don't try to take care of yourself and manage this disease we've discovered, it's only going to get worse. So just because you feel fine, or you think you do, or just because you don't see anything wrong, doesn't mean there's not a problem. So ignorance isn't always bliss. And just because you don't have a definitive diagnosis right now doesn't mean that everything's okay. So it's really important to appreciate that in order to understand the role of lifestyle in health. More to come on that. Hence, you get into public health and disease prevention, which I definitely want you to read. Now, choose my plate. Let me just give you a brief history and keep this really simple. Every 10 years, some of the collective research of what people are eating is brought together, and we look at patterns. We go, this is what people throughout the country, millions of people who agreed to participate, are telling us they eat. This is what we know they need for good health. Ooh, these two don't match up. And then the government says, well, what are all the common diseases? Oh, so clearly they're associated with those bad habits. And they attempt to teach people how to eat well in simple forms. Some of you might remember the food guide pyramid. Then there was a shift in how the pyramid was constructed. It's evolved over time, and this is the most current incarnation of that cumulative nutrition advice. Now, what's fascinating is that politics come into play. You see, this is the federal government's tool. Well, the problem is that the federal government has two jobs. One is to educate consumers like you and I, laypersons, about how to eat for health, and the other is to promote agricultural businesses, agribusiness, crops, and animal farming. So when you indicate to people they should eat fewer animal foods, the agricultural businesses, such as the pork industry and the cattle industry and the dairy industry, are going to get pretty upset and say, whoa, you're supposed to be promoting us. And then the government goes, yeah, but at the same time, I'm supposed to be advising people. It's a pretty sketchy situation, right? So they try to compromise as much as possible, and in my professional opinion, I would tell you that this is probably the best accomplishment thus far in that regard. So let me clarify for you. If you look at this plate, you will notice that 75% of it, 3/4 of it, vegetables, fruits, and grains. In other words, most of the plate emphasizes plant foods, vegetables, fruits, and grains, and it primarily means whole grains, whether it's corn or whole wheat or whole grain rice or bulgur or barley and so on. You notice that those are types of foods, but the word protein is the name of a nutrient. Now, from a food service standpoint, when we say protein, we often mean meat or eggs or cheese. In other words, animal foods. But as you're going to learn here, that's not what the word protein means. You already know it's a type of nutrient. So protein is a nutrient that is found in all foods. You should write that down. Protein is a nutrient found in all foods. It is most profound in animal foods, but it is also very abundant, as I've already mentioned, in nuts, seeds, and beans, or legumes, if you prefer. It also exists in vegetables, some more so than others, but it's there, and it even exists in fruits, though in teeny tiny amounts that might not even be worth counting. But technically, it's in everything. So they put this section here because everyone needs to get enough protein. Not too much, just enough. And so this is their way of saying, however you go about it. If you're vegan, use nuts, seeds, and beans. If you're vegetarian, maybe use some dairy. If you're an omnivore, you can either use seafood or dairy or eggs or lean meats or nuts and seeds and beans. In other words, it doesn't have to be a certain food. You just need some sort of substantial source of protein. You'll get some from your vegetables and grains, but not enough. And then the little side of milk is there to say, hey, the dairy industry needs their due. And I worked for the dairy industry before, so I can appreciate that. But from a nutrition science standpoint, there is nothing that says we must consume dairy. However, we must get the nutrients that dairy provides, and therefore if we choose not to consume dairy, then we just need to make sure that we have plenty of other really nutritious foods in our diet to make up for what we could have gotten from that food source. So the message there is that plants are where it's at, and that you don't have to eat animal foods, but if you do, it's important to pick those which are most helpful. And you'll learn more about what those are as we move forward. As you scroll down, you get into what are nutrients, and obviously you need to read this. So I've already introduced you to the 6 classes of nutrients. And the word essential means that you must get something from food. It's essential that you get it from your food. There are actually some nutrients our body can make, and so we call them non-essential nutrients. If we get pieces and parts that are needed from a variety of foods, then our body can make certain nutrients. We're not going to get too much into that detail in this course, but it is a fascinating thing to know. So please carefully read all the way through. You notice macro. Macro means big. Micro means little. So protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and you'll notice they're at the top here, are the macronutrients. I would suggest you write that down. Why are they the big ones, macro? One reason, we're going to keep it simple, they contain calories. So you need to have that in your notes. Macronutrients contain calories. In fact, go ahead and write this. Protein, 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrate, 4 calories per gram. Fat, 9 calories per gram. So fat has more than twice the calories in 1 gram than protein and carb, and carbohydrate and protein contain exactly the same number of calories. So we all need calories. Calories at a cellular level are the chemicals that allow our cells to produce fuel or gas for our car, our body, to keep it going. So when we eat foods that contain protein, fat, and carbohydrate, and all foods are going to contain one or all of those, we get calories. But we also get the other things that are in those foods, including vitamins and minerals and water and phytochemicals, which are that non-nutrient substance that confers benefits to health. So as you scroll down, you're going to briefly read about each of these, and we're going to talk more about them at a later date, but what you're reading here is incredibly important, so be sure you take good notes and you carefully answer the question on the assignment. whatever's on the assignment, guys, that's what's most important. So don't bog yourself down in a bunch of details that aren't on the assignment. For example, I'm not going to be asking you, what does selenium do? What about manganese? Focus on what I'm directing your attention to so that you are getting what you need to get at this point. Now, once you get down here, it gets into food energy, and I love the fact that this book has this wonderful picture. This thing, as you can see, is called a bomb calorimeter. So essentially, this is how calories were originally measured. So let's pretend that that sample you see all the way in the center, that little orangish yellow thing, is an apple. So they put an apple inside that little cell, the little bomb cell, and then they put that down into the water, and then they flipped the switch on the ignition box. And what happened is it incinerated the food, just like if you were incinerating a body in a morgue, right? So it's like cremation. It incinerates the food. And so as food breaks down, it releases chemical energy because it contains calories, and that's what calories do. They are chemicals that release energy. And when that chemical energy is released, it's in the form of heat. So the temperature of the water rises. They measure that, and it's called kilocalories, which is a massive number. So they shorten it to a simple little word, calories, and then they say, instead of 4 point blah 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 blah, call it 4 calories, call it 9 calories, call it 7 calories. And so a database has been created that says a cup of apple yields this many calories, and then every recipe that's ever been calculated used that database. 4 cups of apples would yield this many calories because we know what 1 cup yields. And that's how we calculate calories in foods. Hopefully what you're thinking right now, if you're a good critical thinker, is, wow, that's probably not very exact. And you'd be correct. So I want you to write this down. Calories in foods are just estimates. They're just estimates. It's not an exact science. It's just to give us a concept of things. When something says it has 100 calories, maybe it has 80. Maybe it has 120. It's around 100. The law says we figure it's wrong by up to 20% in one direction or the other. Same thing goes for your body, incidentally. When we tell you how many calories your body needs, it's an estimate. Very few people will ever have the opportunity to go somewhere and be hooked up to the expensive, complex machinery that can accurately assess how many calories a single body burns. We're all different for a million different reasons. So when we calculate things using any kind of a formula online or on paper, it's an estimate. If we think you need around 2,000 calories a day, and you know your food contains around 2,000 calories a day, you know you're about on track. You're not supposed to micromanage things. When you look at the big picture, when people choose healthful foods, 2 things happen. They get the things they need without having to think too hard, and they probably aren't eating the types of foods where they lose control. Because unlike donuts and Doritos, most people, when they're snacking on carrots and apples, don't lose their mind and consume the whole bag, right? So it all tends to come out in the wash when people are eating healthfully. So I am not going to emphasize calories here because low calorie does not equal healthy. Many of the most healthful foods have more calories than other foods. And that doesn't mean we should avoid them. We should eat them. It all comes down to the big picture, how much you're eating and in what combination. And when you make meals that are a combination of healthful foods, you feel full with less because healthy foods tend to make you feel full. Most plants are full of fiber, and fiber makes us feel full. So you're going to quickly begin to realize here that healthy eating probably is not what you thought. It's not weird packaged diet foods. It's not protein shakes and protein bars. It's not iceberg lettuce and carrot sticks all day long. it's probably some of the things you thought you shouldn't eat, and instead you were eating weird things in place of those items. So I hope you're starting to already feel like this is not going to go where you might have expected, and that you're going to be pleasantly surprised. So again, I'm going to ask that you continue down. You see some of what I already mentioned. You see mention of phytochemicals, which is what we are most concerned with here. And as you get down here to food quality, it's pretty important for us to think about this term right here, nutrient dense. So if a room is densely populated, there's a lot of people in it, right? So if a food is nutrient dense, there are a lot of nutrients in it. We want nutrient dense foods. We don't want low calorie foods. We want nutrient dense foods. When you go shopping, you want to get the most bang for your buck. When you eat, you want to get the most bang for your bite. So continuing on down, you get into the broad role of nutritional science, and you have to have a somewhat elementary appreciation for science to study any topic that is a science, such as nutrition. So I do need you to read through some of this, though we're not going to dig any deeper than what you see here, so please continue through. Once you get down to this page of governmental websites, you can skip past that. The scientific study types, all I'm going to do is maybe ask you one or two small general questions, so skim through this part. It's education. You came to college for an education, so you are unique from the people who haven't had one. And then you get down to the nutritional science evolution. And as we get down here to 1.4, health factors and their impact is very important. There are definitely questions from this section on your assignment. Environment, socioeconomic status and lifestyle, physical activity level, sleeping, genetics, factors that drive food choices, and 1.5, assessing personal health is an important section as well. And if I am not mistaken, this right here, 1.6, is the last section. And I'm going to tell you to please not read this. We are going to come back to this topic at a later date. So read through 1.5. You should be able to successfully complete the assignment. So let me end this with one reminder. Your best approach every week is to look for things to be released before Monday, since they always will be, so you can get a jump start. The first thing you should do is look at the to-do list to find out what to expect for the week. You should pace yourself. If there is a lecture like this one, it is your first priority. If there are any other videos to watch, they are your first priority. You should print out your assignment before you watch anything, because you can do that, and you should be prepared to mark answers on your assignment as you watch any of the videos. If there is anything to read, you should do that after all of the videos and then add more answers to your assignment. If there are any questions on your assignment you are unsure about, you should email me and ask for assistance, or post it in the general discussion area in the discussion board for everyone's benefit, and you should do that no more than 48 hours before the due date, or rather no less, I should say, than 48. So if it's due on a Sunday, you gotta get it to me by Saturday morning so that I have time to see it on a Saturday and get back to you, so that you have time to utilize my response in completing your answers. There is no reason you can't score 100% on every assignment in this course if you're actually engaged, managing your time well, and utilizing all the available resources, including me. I want you to be successful, so you do your part, and I will do whatever I can for you. So at this point, please let me know if you need any help.